All right, you're watching Live Now. I'm Austin Westfall. Live look at the White House approaching 10 p.m. in the nation's capital. Axios with this. They say that the U.S. and Russia are closing in on a deal to continue to observe their nuclear arms reduction treaty that expires today. At last check, both Presidents Trump and Putin still haven't officially agreed to a deal, but it seems this is only a piece of what's going on. President Trump posting this today, and it was also sent out by the FDD's Andrea Stricker. We'll check in with her in a moment. Trump's post saying this: the United States is the most powerful country in the world. I completely rebuilt its military in my first term, including new and many refurbished nuclear weapons. I also added Space Force and now continue to rebuild our military at levels never seen before. We are even adding battleships, which are 100 times more powerful than the ones that roamed the seas during World War II, the Iowa, Missouri, Alabama, and others. I have stopped nuclear wars from breaking out across the world between Pakistan and India, Iran and Israel, and Russia and Ukraine. Rather than extend the, quote, New START, which he says is a badly negotiated deal by the United States that, aside from everything else, is being grossly violated, we should have our nuclear experts work on a new, improved, and modernized treaty that can last long into the future. Andrea Stricker standing by with us here to discuss. She's a nuclear proliferation expert with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. President Trump says the current treaty is being grossly violated, Andrea. From what you've seen, is there evidence that it has been violated?
Well, great to be with you, Austin. There is, in fact, evidence that Russia's been violating the treaty, in fact, for a long time. In 2020, during the COVID pandemic, both sides actually suspended the mutual inspections and the verification mechanisms that really made this treaty work. And Russia never restored them. So in 2023, it officially suspended all of that. And so the U.S. has really had no assurance that Russia has been complying all this time, although we use our national intelligence assessments to assess that in general, they have been going more or less just above the stockpile of 1,550 deployed nuclear weapons per side. But there's no certainty that that's the truth.
The White House, and I'll read it, they say they want a new, improved, and modernized treaty that can last long into the future. What improvements can be made? What can be argued as missing from the current treaty?
It's a great question. And I think what the missing ingredient here is China. So China is actually creating a great power competitor to the US and Russia by increasing its nuclear weapons arsenal. So it used to have around 200 nuclear weapons, and in recent years, it's gone past 600. And the Defense Department expects that it's going to go to at least 1,000 by 2030 and potentially to 1,500 by 2035. So New START is really designed to deal with the two great power competitors, the US and Russia, but we have China on the scene now, and there's nothing that is restraining it. And I think the US in particular is concerned about that because it does have to plan for something like a mutual joint strike by the Russians and the Chinese in cooperation against the US. And we may not have the force posture and the numbers to actually deter that kind of an attack.
President Obama and Medvedev, they signed the last deal in 2010. What sort of cooperation was present between the U.S. and Russia back then that perhaps is no longer there now?
Well, what really happened was Vladimir Putin came on the scene, and he really reversed a lot of that cooperation. So the U.S. was cooperating more with Russia since the fall of the Soviet Union, of course, and put in place this really tough, rigorous inspection regime where both sides could visit the other side to inspect whether they're complying with New START 18 times per year, as well as give each other data every single year on launches, on movements that were restricted by the treaty. But that all fell apart, really, when Vladimir Putin invaded Crimea in 2014, then proceeded to invade Ukraine in 2022. And it's really the Russians' fault, I would say, that this all fell apart because they've also been testing these novel delivery systems like the Poseidon underwater drone, a nuclear-powered missile. And I don't think that really showed good faith on their part, as well as being so aggressive on the world stage.
You know, you mentioned China. Trump has previously said that he wants China to be a part of arms control. Would that mean that President Xi would have to get directly involved with any sort of potential agreement that would have to get signed in the future?
It absolutely would. China would have to do something that it's really reticent to do, which is to open its system to inspections, the mutual inspections that the US and Russia have submitted to from one another. And so far, because China really wants to reach parity with the US and Russia, it hasn't wanted to engage in arms control. I think that's a real short sight on their end, because now they may see the US and Russia actually upload additional warheads and make Beijing even more insecure. So I think as the dust settles, Beijing may be more willing to come to the table, but it may take a few years, and that puts all sides in an increasingly insecure position.
So the nuclear arms reduction treaty ends today, and now it just kind of seems like we're in a holding pattern, waiting for what comes next. So what nuclear safeguards are missing in the interim?
In the interim, we don't know what the Russians are uploading as far as their warheads, short of what we know from national intelligence mechanisms. But that's been the case again for some time, a few years since they suspended the verification mechanisms. And I think the US is very concerned and has been concerned for some time that New START didn't address what we call non-strategic nuclear warheads. Those are the ones that the Russians could quickly upload. They have around 1,000 to 2,000 of those weapons, whereas the US has only about 200 at the ready to upload. So I think Trump and his administration need to be thinking about what force posture they may need to add in order to actually deter Russia and China simultaneously.
Andrea Stricker is a nuclear proliferation expert with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Good to see you. Thanks.
Thank you.